I was born into an interesting family. We were broken emotionally and financially. I was pretty socially awkward and behaviorally. I always had stomach issues and allergies and got sick often, etc. I started school and I would get in trouble. I didn't know better, so I would slap kids and be really aggressive. So I was getting kicked out of class a bunch of times a day. I'm really sensory and hyperactive. And it got worse as I got older, and it started affecting my learning and academic. At the same time, there was abuse going on at home. I have a father who is emotionally unwell and has mental health issues, and he was verbally and physically abusive. I started having problems because I was overweight even though I was eating healthy, blood sugar and cholesterol, and I started restricting my eating. I was barely eating and became underweight around that time, and around 7 to 8 years old, I got diagnosed with autism and anxiety, ADHD, and a mood disorder. At this point, people were taking advantage of me for all types of things, and neighbors started sexually abusing me, telling me if I let them, they would be my friend, and I was desperate for a friend. It went on until I moved. At this point, my school kicked me out, and my mom switched me to a self-contained class and started me on medication. I started ABA therapy, and I kept declining, and eventually I was kicked out of that school too. Then the physical issues got worse. I was always clumsy and wasn't up to par. I had fine motor issues, but I took a fast decline. First it was a foot drop. I went to physical therapy, and they said it's definitely neurological. At the same time, stuff at home started declining too. They then decided to put me back in my old school, and they kicked me out by the time a month came. I got lost, had no friends, my physical health was really bad, and at this point I started not being able to walk the stairs regularly, and it just kept getting worse. I started going to a neurologist, and she was very concerned that my reflexes were off. The neurologist was very concerned and ordered a ton of tests, but none of them were showing things that would cause this. I ended up being homeschooled, and it was not working out, but we still tried. I was regressing academically and physically. Altogether, that year was a disaster for my family, and my health was taking a steady decline. The next year, we decided to be organized and prepare, so we had a whole program in place for PT speech and ABA SPED. It was getting really tough to walk the stairs, but I was getting intense PT and OT, so I didn't regress as fast. Then, in the middle of the year, my mother got diagnosed with cancer, solitary plasmacytoma. First, she was in the hospital, then rehab, as it was on her spinal cord. So I started staying at my aunt's. Then after my mom said she needed to rest up by her mother, so our whole family moved into my grandma's house. She took the brave step of separating while there. My mom's cancer did not go away, and I continued to decline. Next year, I started going to a school for students with autism out of state. I was staying at my dad's mom's house, which was not fun, but the school had all the services that I needed. And they realized my feet were going numb, and that's when I started not being able to straighten my legs, so walking was super hard. I just kept regressing in all areas, and the symptoms started getting really aggressive, and my mom brought me to the emergency room. I was admitted and had a lot of tests done, and they just didn't have any answers. I went home with an appointment with one of the consultants for a second opinion. I went there and, without examining, said conversation/F&D, said I should go to rehab in 4 months. So I went on. My hands began to clench and I couldn't afford it, but I went back to my chaotic life. I was in Brooklyn in school while my mom moved into her own house that was special for me. We got a house that would work for me with a banister on the right shower rod since I kept falling. At the same time, I went on a school trip that lasted over the weekend, and at that point I was really struggling. I couldn't walk up the stairs anymore, and I was struggling supporting my own body. On the trip, I was in extreme agony, and I started struggling swallowing. I went home, and right away my mom brought me to the hospital. I got there, and they said it's conversion disorder, even though my reflexes were newborn-like. They tried to sustain me on IV fluids, but couldn't, so they placed an NG tube and started continuous feeds. I lost my ability to walk, and then stand in 2 months waiting for rehab. I finally got there, and right away they said they just didn't know what to do. I stayed a week, and they sent me back. When I got back, I continued declining. I couldn't sit, then roll, then hold my head up, then came continence both 1 and 2. I started to give up and kept on pulling my tube out. Then 2 months later, they asked me if I would go to the med/psych ward by Hasbro. They said everything would be the same, so I gave consent, and if I ever wanted to leave, I can. I got there, and they took my phone away from me and made me a one-on-one. I got mad and cut off all ties to my family and friends. It was a crazy place. started off with therapy, but they didn't know what they were doing. Then started the crazy part. I was in a tilted wheelchair because I couldn't support myself, but they decided to put me in a regular wheelchair. Of course I fell out, so they decided that I would have to stay on the floor. And if I fall out, I had to stay on the floor for an hour. Nobody was allowed to talk to me, and I wasn't allowed to talk to anyone either. They would do this, so I started self-harming. I would use my thumb, which was the only finger that I could still use, and dig into myself the whole day until the night when they put me in bed. Also, when they were yanking my hands open, I would scream and cry. Then with the food, they would put me in a tilted chair and give me 10 minutes to eat. Otherwise, they would retrain me and give me a shot of Ativan in my sore spot. And this happened 3 times a day. They took me off the meds that were working and put me on psych meds. I started retaining urine, so they had to cath me, but they waited so long and I was in so much pain. They got 1,200 cc's of urine and decided they were only catheterizing me every 12 hours. I started having SI. I said I'd rather be dead than there, so I would try and cut deep into my skin. They put an order that nobody was allowed to stop me, and one day I dug so deep that they actually had to call security because they were not able to stop me due to orders. They caught the surge and had to stuff it because they couldn't do surgery because it wasn't sterile. I was out on a 2-to-1 for a few days and then a 1-to-1. I then remembered that they said I can sign out, so I asked, and they said, no, you're not mentally fit to make that decision, and they decided to sedate me and open my hands. Now my hands were contracted and I had a big infection. They put something in my hands to keep it open, and this went on for 2 months until I realized that my family and friends did nothing wrong. So I slowly started speaking to my family again, and turns out the hospitals and doctors were lying to everyone. I told them what was going on and they told them they had to stop treatment. After a while, my mom decided to take me home, and eventually she did. An ambulance brought me to the airport and a plane ambulance brought me to my city. They had the ambulance take me to my house where they set up a ramp, a tilted wheelchair, and a hospital bedroom on the first floor that used to be a stuffy. They did not send me home with the proper script, so we had to figure it out on our own due to my mother having one of her tumors on her spine. She could not care for me on her own. She has to pay for a full-time aid out of pocket. I was stable for a while, but then I started declining again. My memory is getting worse. I started aspirating and vomiting, and then I was stable for a while again. My mom kept bringing me to doctors, and they all said it's something science has not figured out yet. I opened a slime shop and a GoFundMe for my situation, and I stayed stable for a while. I've been diagnosed with a couple of things, but we didn't have the reason I started declining again. About 6 months ago, my arms contracted, my speech started slurring, then I could only make noises and only people who knew me well could understand. Now comes the most amazing part. I went to an infectious disease doctor who started me on a bunch of meds and suspected some sort of tick-borne disease and infection-induced autoimmune encephalitis. They put me on a TA1 shot, 3 antibiotics, and anti-inflammatory meds. And the problem is now that I'm in the HERC state. The infection thinks it owns my body since it's been there so long. But I started making progress. I can now move my toes and ankles, and my arms are less tight, and I have more trunk control. I've already been diagnosed with Rocky Mountain spotted fever, and we think there's more. I'm still testing, but I recently got pandas, and it may be chronic now, but at least we have answers. Also, my mind comes and goes, so no offense to anyone. My journey is far from over.
Story time about a catfish that went way too far. My coworker Ron was always looking for girls way above his league on dating apps and social media. If the girl didn't look like a supermodel, he wasn't interested. He would always complain that the girls he liked would never respond. To make matters worse, Ron isn't the best looking guy in the world and he'd been out of the dating scene for a few years. We told him to lower his standards and be more realistic, but he wouldn't budge. One of my other coworkers named Jason decided to give him what he wanted and made a fake Facebook profile pretending to be a beautiful girl named Bella. He set her location to Canada and messaged Ron. Ron took the bait and they began messaging back and forth for months. He would always talk about Bella and how he couldn't wait to go to Canada to meet her. He was looking at plane tickets and talking about how he's been saving up for this trip. I was starting to think that this joke was going too far, but I hadn't seen anything yet. Ron came to work one day distraught and said that Bella had gotten into a terrible car accident and is in a coma that she wasn't expected to come out of. He said Bella's sister messaged him last night and told him the news. I figured Jason must have gotten bored of catfishing Ron and this was his way of killing Bella off and being done with it. Little did I know that Jason had no intention of stopping anytime soon, and this was just the beginning. Part 2 about a catfish that went way too far. Ron was sad for weeks about the news of Bella being in a coma, but said that Bella's sister had been cheering him up. One day, Ron came in and told me that he's developed feelings for Bella's sister and they've been talking every day since the accident. I couldn't believe that Jason was still catfishing this man, now as a whole new character. Ron was happy again and falling for Bella's sister and was now talking about going to Canada to visit her instead. About a month later, Ron came into work frazzled. He explained to me that Bella had miraculously come out of her coma, which was great, but he had since moved forward with her sister. He said that Bella found out they had been talking every day while she was in a coma. He further explained that the sisters are now fighting over him and he doesn't know what to do. Just then, Ron looked at his phone and turned as pale as a ghost. Bella's sister made a public post on Facebook with Ron tagged that read, "You think your boyfriend is so good? Look what he sent me when you were in a coma," with private photos of Ron attached. This whole thing had already gone too far, but this was just taking it to another level. I finally spilled the beans and told him that it was Jason from electronics the whole time. Ron ran over there enraged and confronted Jason. They ended up fighting in the parking lot that same day, but somehow they're still friends and laugh about it now. This is why you should think twice about letting kids stay home alone. I lived in a small village where everyone knows everyone and I could count the amount of houses on 2 hands. Nothing ever happened there, proper out in the stick stuff. One night, a few years ago, my mom and stepdad had gone out for this concert. They left me in charge of my little brother and dog. I was around 14 years old and I felt really proud that my parents trusted me enough to do that. I thought I was a cool sibling and an even cooler babysitter by staying up late, eating pizza, etc. Around 10:30 p.m. the power cut out. I didn't think anything of it because the weather hadn't been great lately and I figured that had something to do with it. I got some candles out of the cupboard and lit them, then put on some of our favorite songs. As soon as I sat back down, my little brother Sonny turned to me being the weird little kid that he was and told me in the calmest way possible that there was someone outside. I was a little unsettled by this, but our dog hadn't done anything, so I assumed it was just the neighbors. Sonny just shrugged and went back to his drawings. It was about 45 minutes after the power went out and I knew my dog needed to go out to do business. I told Sonny to grab him a biscuit while I let him out. When I opened the door, Sonny pushed past me and said, "I know you're out there and I'm calling the police." That's when I hear rustling from just above the doorway. When I looked up, I was terrified to see a man staring at me. Part 2, why you should think twice about letting kids stay home alone. Now our kitchen was an extension to the original house and had a flat roof that's competitively low compared to the rest of the house with easy access to the bathroom window. After my little brother Sonny yelled out, he had the biggest, proudest smile I'd ever seen on his face. I don't think I'll ever forget the way Sonny's face dropped when he looked above my head. I looked up and saw a man sitting on the roof staring down at me. He panicked and tried to kick me, then ran off into the neighbor's garden. I was terrified and Sonny was bawling his eyes out. I ushered him inside as quickly as possible and grabbed a knife from the kitchen. We went into his room and I tried to get him to sleep as I waited for our parents to get back. It was an agonizingly long 4 hours before they did. My stepdad immediately went outside to check to see if everything was alright. I heard them talking about how something had smashed the fuse box. We obviously called the police, but they didn't come until later the next day. They did an immediate search and found a makeshift bed in a nearby disused barn along with pictures of silhouettes of us in the shower through the frosted glass. The whole experience shook us up and we moved as soon as we could. However, because of this I always shut the curtains whenever I can and I see shadows underneath every door I see.